Introduction to Windows Server 2003. In this nugget, we're going to take an introductory look into Windows Server 2003. Now, for many of you that might have come from Windows 2000 and you're coming in cold to Windows Server 2003, I'm going to first show you a couple of basic things you'll see as soon as you open up the server and boot it up. One of the things you'll see here is the Manage Your Server item, which we'll look at shortly here. And this is a new way Microsoft recommends to manage your server. And they want you to access various tools through that method and so forth. Might be a little different than what you're used to, but at least you'll see what Microsoft wants you to do. You don't have to use it. And then we'll take a look at some interface changes as well, which again is especially useful if you're coming in cold to Windows Server 2003, and also if you don't have much or any experience with Windows XP, because the interface items are often very similar between the products. The actual first Windows Server 2003 product was actually Windows XP in terms of its core programming and things like that. And of course, the Windows Server product is just the beefier version. Then we have the versions of Windows Server 2003 that we need to discuss, because you need to know what's the proper version for me to use. Should I use Standard or Enterprise version, or do I need Data Center? All of those kinds of things we'll take a look at, as well as the meat of this will be some of the technical differences. Now, this won't be an in-depth discussion of the technical differences, because we're saving that for the rest of the nuggets. However, we'll take a look at some things that will be of particular interest to you. And although we won't look at all the differences that are new with Windows Server 2003, because there's got to be hundreds of them, we will look at several things that are relevant to our discussion in this series. Well, when you first start up Windows Server 2003 and log on, you'll see this screen that says Manage Your Server. And Microsoft likes us to use this to do a lot of different things, such as adding roles to our server. So if you want to add or remove a role such as a DNS server, then not only would it install DNS, as you could also get through add and remove programs, but you could also start a wizard using this method that would help you to configure your zones and things such as this. Now, if that's not the desired behavior, and if you don't want to see all this introductory hand-holding to help you get started with your server, you could go down here and just do not display this page at log on, and I'll check that box because we won't be using it for several of our nuggets. And then you can also manage server roles so that after I've added a role, then there will be additional things that appear down here at the bottom. For example, if I made it a domain controller, there will be a green arrow link like this down here that would help me to manage my users and computers. And that's the friendly term for it, but really it just opens up Active Directory users and computers. And then over here on the top, you'll see that we can go to the Help and Support Center. By the way, the Help and Support Center is excellent in Windows Server 2003. And you might remember in previous versions of Windows, if you needed help, the last place you go was the online help, because it just gives you very rudimentary information. But this is actually excellent help, and you can also get to the Help and Support Center on the Start menu, of course. The interface with Windows Server 2003 is much like Windows XP, as I mentioned earlier. However, this Manage Your Server item here will give you a bunch of additional tools that you don't have, of course, with XP, such as various administrative tools. If I click on that, you'll see that that's the same administrative tools that I would have also gotten on the Start menu, which we'll address in more detail shortly. And there's an administrative tools item here, and you can see all the various items that are available to us. It's just the same thing, just a different way of showing it to us. Opens it up in a window. Then we can look at more tools, which is very useful. This actually comes out of the page of the Help and Support Center. And from here we can take a look at, for example, the command line reference tools. There are a lot more command line tools available now than we've had in previous versions of Windows. And although you might not need to use 80 or 90% of these most of the time, boy, when you need one, you click on this and you can see a lot of different tools that are available to you, many of which are carried over from previous versions of Windows, and many of which are new and very, very useful. Now let me go back up here where I skipped a minute ago, and that's the Help and Support Center tools, where you can view, again, stuff that's also available through other information. So I could go to My Computer Information, and then I could just view general information about this computer, which takes you basically to the property information that you would see if you right-clicked on the computer and chose Properties, but it also gives you additional information, such as the kind of hardware that is in this machine. So it gives you a lot of different information for this, very easy to read, and so forth. And if we return to My Computer Information, then we see that there are several other self-explanatory links that appear here. And I'm not going to exhaust all of these. You can find these on your own. But let me just point out that one thing I think you'll like about them is that it really easily summarizes a lot of detailed information into a single page of information for you. And it's not information you couldn't get otherwise through other system tools that are included in Windows Server 2003 or through Resource Kit tools. However, you have to dig up those pieces of information one at a time, and you got to collect them all and figure out a way to summarize them all all together. This does it for you within a single interface, and it's much easier that way. And then you can view advanced system information as well here. And one thing I like about all of these things, and these are also, I think, self-explanatory, is that you can view information on another computer, and that way if I want to do this, for example, I have a computer named .NET on my network, I can look at its computer information remotely, and that's very useful information, obviously, as well. Now, as we go into our more tools item here, let's also take a look at Windows Interface Administrative Tool Reference, which we see here. And again, this is similar to the command line reference up here. It's just that, again, it gives us an alphabetical listing for various tools we might use, some that you might recognize, Active Directory users and computers, for example. And that one just gives us information about it and allows us to open it. Very basic. You probably will just use the start menu for that kind of thing, however. Then you can look at various tools by category, and this is going to be useful because there's so many new tools here in Windows Server 2003, and you might not need to use them, but if you're having trouble with, for example, Active Directory problems, you might just go to Active Directory Management Tools and see if there's something in here that might be able to help you. And so it's a very easy way to sort through those kinds of tools, and you see several others here as well. Windows support tools as well are very useful, and these tools will appear to you in a help file, suptools.chm, which is the standard help file format. Now let me point this out as well. You notice that in our entire Help and Support Center here, we're not looking at the standard CHM type file. Microsoft is moving towards a web-based or an XML-based format for showing us not only